So the last program is flashcard app. And let me see if I can grab. It's easier if I show what it looks like when it runs first. Okay, can everyone see this window? Yeah, it's going to be a WPF application. So the way this is it's a flashcard application. So you see here, what does the D in solid represent? There's a title up here. There's the card number here. You can improve the format if you want. And so with a flashcard app, it doesn't actually, you don't type in the response. You just ask yourself, okay, what does D in solid represent? Does anyone know what D in solid represents? This is WPF. Go with framework. It'll be easier. So D represents, I'm thinking dependency inversion. Yeah, dependency inversion principle. So you see the answer, and then what you do is with one of these, you say, hey, did I get it right? I got it right. And then it randomly picks the next question. What does L in solid represent? Anybody know? So Liskov substitution principle. Yes, Liskov substitution principle. I got that one right. What does the D represent? Well, it's presenting it again. So now we know that's dependency inversion. And you just keep going through here. What's a single responsibility principle represent? And single responsibility principle is that any class or function really should do one thing and one thing only. So basically that's the idea. And then you have another tab where you can add, remove, update questions. And so maybe let's see, this one, open close principle. That should have really have a label that says title. And then this says describe the open close principle. And then classes are open for extension, but closed for modification. And then I add that one. Now I've got the open close principle. And if I double click on these, it brings them up. And over here it shows how many times I've got them right before. You also have a remove, so I can select one here and remove. Or if I want to change, for example, open close. So like I say, blah, I can make sure this is selected and click update. And now when I come back to it, oh, it didn't look like it took. Yeah, so then I can do updates as well, just with the update button. And so that gives me all my CRUD functionality, because I can create, I can retrieve by double clicking, I can remove, or I can update. And then here's where it actually runs. So now describe the single responsibility principle. And so let's say I got that one right. And then it just keeps going through. And if I put wrong, it really should be saying one right, one wrong. So it probably should be 1/2 for the ones I got wrong. The person implemented this one, I think, just added and subtracted them, so that gave you overall score. Now, the way I'm not requiring you, I think, in the spec to implement this, but I think it's the way I wrote the spec is you can just randomly select which one. But in a normal flashcard app, often what you would do is the ones that you rank better at get selected less often than the ones that you rank higher at. So if you want to implement that as your selection method, that's fine. And what I was thinking with this is this could actually be something that's potentially useful to you. There are flashcard applications out there. You can see how they kind of operate. But does the basic functioning of this application make sense? Oh, that's not it. So this is the flashcard application, which is P8. And so, normal program requirements, make sure that you put your comment header on everything. And it's basically a program that present and manage flashcards. And there's an interesting study on flashcards here from Cornell, I think. But you can read about that, and that will tell you why this approach works for learning things. And your flashcard will have an application that will have a database that stores the flashcards. A form application that gives the user the ability to run through their flashcards and a way to manage, i.e. CRUD, their flashcards. So your database is going to look like this. It's going to have a single table with a card. I put in mine card ID, title, question, answer, num right, and num wrong. And then you're going to have a database manager class. And before in our demo, we were kind of like putting stuff kind of all over the place. This is the idea of programming with a layer to access your data. And your data manager class will basically be a class that provides you the following methods. A get cards method, and I used a binding list for some reason. I think you can just use a regular list. So this could just be a regular list like that. That returns a list of cards. And this, I give you the queries actually here. So if you don't know SQL, the queries are here. And then you have an add card method, which you pass in a card, and it will insert that card into the database. A remove card method that you pass it a card, and it will remove a card from the database. An update card, you pass it in a card. And the key with this is when you add a card, it ignores basically the ID number you pass in. So you don't have to set the ID card in this one. With the remove and update card, you have to set the ID field because it's going to, with the remove card, it's just going to use the ID field. In fact, you could have everything else blank but the ID field and it would work fine. With the update card, you're going to pass in a card and it's going to have the everything filled out, in fact, including the ID, and it will just use that ID to identify which card it's going to update. So in all of these three, add, remove, and updates, you construct a card, you pass it to the method then does all the work with the database. Does that make sense? Now, there's a couple ways you've learned how to do this. You can use a data adapter if you want. You can also just do these as SQL commands and just execute non-query the SQL commands. With the get cards, you're going to have to either use a data adapter or you're going to have to create a data reader and read the data using a data reader to build your list of cards. And so get cards, you'll pass in a reference to a list you want to be filled, and it will fill that list from the database. You could also make the return type be a list of cards and use that for list get cards too. That I would be fine with that. Any way you want to do that here. But I do want you to build this class, this data manager class that has these 4 methods, and then use that class when you need to interact with the database. Let me look. This doesn't look very good online because you can't see it, so I'm going to download this. Can everyone see? Okay. So here's the UML format for the database manager. It's got these 4 methods. And then you've got this, you need a class to represent a card. A card basically has all the attributes that are in your database. They match that. And I have a calc method in here because it has num right, num wrong, and let's see. I got 2 constructors, a toString. What did the calc do? Oh, right, wrong ratio. It calculates every time you set the number right, number wrong. It recalculates this right to wrong ratio, and then if you wanted to, you could use that right to wrong ratio to select the weight of which card you would select. I don't give you an algorithm for that. You can choose to implement that or just randomly select them. I'm fine with that. Your form class is basically like this, and this really can just be a list. It doesn't have to be a binding list. And I don't think the binding list works quite the way I I thought it would. If you want to try to use that, you can. But I would just use a regular list. And then in the constructor form, you're going to, after initialize component, you're going to call the get cards method from the data manager class that will use a SQL data reader or data adapter. To read the cards into your list of cards. And then you're going to, it'll get the cards from the database using something like select star asterisk from card. And you then call a get. Now you can also, and then you'll bind the, in there you could also go ahead and bind in the manage cards, you could bind that list back there to this get card method. But once you do all that, then you're going to make a get random card method that will randomly select a card from the list of cards, and then call a method called display card question that will display the card question. So get random card basically points to a random card in the list, and if you think about it, it's just a random number generator. And then the display card question, it displays everything except for the answer. So it shouldn't actually display the answer, it should just display the title and the question like this. So this is what that looks like at that point. And then when they click on the button for the answer here, show answer, then that button event will show the answer here. And notice that when you first show the question, you have the right and wrong buttons disabled. Then after you click show answer, it shows the answer, and then these two are enabled and that one's disabled. And so if you were correct, and then it'll display these instructions to the user. And notice as you go through it display, initially it says, think about the answer and then click show answer. And then down here it says, if you were correct, click right, otherwise click wrong. And so if they're right, they'll click right. And then what right will do is it'll increment the number right property of the card. If it's wrong, it'll increment the number wrong property. And then you're going to call the update method in your database manager to update that information in the card. And then you'll pick a random card, so it grabs another random card, and then it resets to this view with the next question. And then it just keeps going in a loop like that. Does that make sense? Okay, then you have the Manage Cards tab. So with the Manage Cards tab, that's the second tab here. What you're going to do is this list needs to be bound to your list of cards. And then what you do is you have the first one selected, and you're going to have show from that first card title, question, and answer from the first card. And then you're going to have these three buttons: add, update, and remove. So if you click add, whatever's here will be added as a new card in the database. So the process will be take whatever's your title, question, and answer, call your DB manager's add card, make a card out of that, call your add card method, passing that card in, and then a new card will be created. You'll then refresh this. You'll then you'll call get cards from the get cards method to refresh the list of cards, and then you'll redisplay everything. If if someone double clicks on one of these, you'll handle a double click event to basically update title, question, and answer from whichever card they selected. And then if they click update, whatever is in here will be, the card you'll create a card from this, and then you will call your database's update card method, and it will update the card, and then you'll do the reload process again. And then if you click remove, basically you're just going to take that card that's currently selected, pass it to the remove method, and it will remove it from the database. And then you'll refresh everything from the database again. So everything always ends up with reloading this from the database and redisplaying everything so that everything gets updated. You need to place your connection in app config using system configuration namespace and the configuration manager, just like we showed in the demonstration. And here's what your database should look like. It'll either, and Stephen, yours, you maybe try it with a backslash here. Maybe that's what's messing it up. You're going to want to put your database in your project. And I noticed in this one I had a backslash here. Sometimes it's this way. So we'll play around with that here in a second. But you're going to want to put your connection string in your app.config file, and then you're going to want to make sure you have system.configuration in order to get access to it. And then I've got, let's see if this one is still active. Oh, and then for this idea of having a file to work with our database, here's an article on the repository pattern, which basically describes one way of doing that and what the theory behind it is. And you can read that just to kind of understand the idea of how to put a database manager in your layer. And they actually go one step further. They create an interface that has an insert, update, and delete, and they go through a lot more detail. I'm not going to this level of complexity, but this is not a bad thing to explore and to learn more about how that works. Any questions? Probably have some later on. Okay, so just to kind of go back over the how to connect to a database part. I'll demonstrate here. I'm going to make a .NET WPF app. I'm going to call it Database Review. You don't have to follow along if you don't want to, but you can if you want. I do have this recorded. I'm going to build this just to make sure that I have everything sorted out before I get started. Yeah, I can post this. Okay, looks like I've got a working window. Okay, so I'm going to add my database. So I right click, add, and then new item. I'm going to pick data. And then we want a service-based database. And I'm going to call this one robots.mdf. Let's say I want to have a database to keep track of the giant robotic army I'm going to use to take over the world with. If it'll let me type, hello. RobotDB. And then I'll double click on my database to bring it up here in the Server Explorer. And then we add a table. And I'm going to name my table robot. Normally our databases, we make our table, our name singular. And let me let the design surface load. I'm going to make this an identity so that it auto numbers. If I right click on this and look at properties, I will see that by doing that, it sets the identity to true with an increment of 1 and a seed of 1. And then up here, I can just start putting, so I will give a title, varchar 50 should be fine. Let's see, size, well, it'll be large. I'll just keep doing varchar for these. I don't know. What else you want to know about our robots? Serial number. Operational. They use bit. We'll use bit for that's good enough. I just want to kind of give a little bit of a demo. So that's, I don't want to save it. I'm going to just call update. Update database. It's taking a little bit. Maybe it didn't take. Okay, so there's my robot table. I can, now that I've got my table built here, I can close this and I can right click on my robot table and show table data. And let's see, quadruped 1, size small, serial number 111, operational true, and then I'll have maybe another one that's hexapod 1, medium, and then 1112. Whoa. So I've got some robots here. Notice that it has those red symbols until I move off the line. When I move off the line, it actually is saving it to the database. And just to make sure, I can close that, right click on my robot and show table data. And all I'm doing is putting just some test data in here so that I have something to work with. Does that make sense? So now that I have that, I'm going to make a few classes. And so in here, I'm going to add a class. And the first class I'm going to make is just something to represent a robot. So I'm going to make a robot class. And it's just going to follow this. So I'm going to make an ID field. A string title field, a string size field, and I'm going to do it all with properties. A string serial number, a string or Boolean for operational. So, and I might as well make it public. So this class here is really just a container to hold one robot. Does that make sense? And so now that we've got this this class here, now what I need is something to pull robots from the database. And so what I might do is, so I'm going to make a class. It's going to be similar to our database manager class. And I called it database manager in the other one, but since we could have multiple databases, I'm going to call it, rather than database manager, I'm going to call mine actually DB table. And you can call it that if you want. I think it actually makes more sense. Well, yeah. Or I'll call it DB set. Robots. Or maybe DB manager robots. Because each one, there's going to be there would be one of these theoretically for each table. And so in here, I'm going to want the following things: a select all, an insert, an update, and a delete. And for the select all, I'm going to make this maybe return a list. Actually, that one I made it void, but I think I kind of prefer to do it this way. I want to make this be a list of robot called get robots. And the way I'm going to do, we'll do this with let's see, what last time we used we'll make a SQL connection. And of course I need to add a reference to using system data SQL client. And I need to pass in my connection string. So to be able to get, so string, connection string is equal to, and to get my connection string, I can just look at the properties of my database. And that would be if I was to hard code it in here. I'm going to use the hard coded one just for a second, just to test this out initially. I'm using the hard-coded connection string for now, and then I'll put this into database later. But now I've got my connection. Now what I want to do is create a SQL command. So SQL command is equal to, and what it'll be is select star from robot, which is the name of my table here. And then SQL data reader is equal to new SQL data reader Actually, it's not that way. It's really just command dot execute oh So I create my command, and then I can do a command dot execute reader. And this will generate a data reader. Once I have that data reader, then what I want to do is I need to make this list. So I need a list of robots to begin with, equals a new list of robot. And now I'm going to the read method will advance the data reader to the next record, and it returns true if I have something. So if it has something, then I'm going to go through and I'm going to instantiate a new robot. So robot is equal to new robot. Robot dot ID is going to equal dr dot get int32, because the first field is an integer. And I'm going to read index 0, which is the first element. Then robot dot title is equal to dr dot, and that's going to be a string, get string, reading the next element, robot dot size is equal to dr dot, and that was also a string, get element 2, and then robot dot serial number equals dr, and they get another string, and that's element 3. And robot dot operational is equal to dr dot get bool, get boolean, and that's element 4. Then now I'm going to take that robot and add it to my list of robots up here. And it'll keep going through to get until it gets all of them and reads them in and creates this list of robots. And then at the end, I'm going to return robots. Does that make sense? So that's using a data reader. And it's a little more primitive than using an adapter, but it makes sense, and it works just fine. Now, to test this, I'm going to go to my main window, and I'm going to bring in
someone wanted to know how you got that connection string.
So if you right-click on your database in your Server Explorer and look at Properties, right here it says connection string. You can double-click on that and copy it. Yep. So now under my main window, I'm going to bring in from the toolbox a list box. And with this list box, we'll give it a name because we want to be able to access it programmatically. So name is equal to LB robots. And then I'm going to view code, and I'm going to make a list of robots called robots at the class level. And then down here, I'm just going to say robots is equal to, and I need DB manager robots. So I'm going to need one of those too. So I'm just going to instantiate that up here. DB manager robots. DBMR for DB Manager Robots equals new DB Manager Robots. And I can't see my methods. Why is that? I didn't make it public. Call my getRobots method, and it's going to return all the robots from the database and throw them here. And actually, there's a problem with the way I went with this. Returning the list of robots here would work, but that would mean each time I would be creating a new one. And we'd run into that problem again. That's why I actually did this. And that's what I'm going to represent here. It's really better to do it this way and pass in a reference. And then not return anything. And the reason is that if I pass in a reference, it's better to pass in a reference and start off by saying robots.clear. So clear it out, reload it, and bring it back. That way I keep the same reference. It'll make things easier later on. So now I'll just pass that reference in that way. Since this is a reference type, I don't have to use an out variable or anything like that. And then that will fill the robots. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say listbox robots dot items dot or item source is equal to robots. And then I'll just run it. I think I'm going to have a problem here. I needed to make this new right here. Yes, you could also instantiate them in the constructor too. And why aren't I seeing my form show up? Let's see if we have a problem. I'll run in debug mode. Oh, I forgot to open up my connection. So before I can do my read, I need to connection.open. Notice how it doesn't give you an error unless you run in debug mode. So you probably want to run debug mode in this one. Okay, you didn't like that. Let's see what's happening next. Oh, okay. And then also our SQL command needs, we have to set the connection to our SQL command too. So I forgot that, and I forgot to open the connection. Okay, now it opened. So, why do I have DatabaseReview.robot 3 times? Did it manage to read the database? Can everyone hear me? Yep, no two-string method. At this point, do I suspect that it is reading the database, though? Probably, because I put 3 in the database, and I've got 3 here. So that's probably okay. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go to my robot class, and I'm going to make a nice little two-string for it. So in here, I will do a public override two-string return, and I'll just say we'll go title plus size plus serial number. I'll keep it simple. And then I'll run it again. And it looks like I'm getting stuff from the database, correct? So I've got my get working, I've got this list working. The next thing is to now CRUD this this data. So I'm going to go back to my DB manager, and I've got my get robots is working. So now I'm going to maybe I'll just kind of borrow from this. Well, first off, this connection string. I'm going to set this inside of my app config folder. And under config, it goes something like this. Connection strings, add, connection string equals, and I'll call this one robot DB, and provider name is equal to, I actually have to look that up. Actually, I probably can get away without it. Oh, the connection string is actually going to be this. The what I was thinking it was is name.
Well, I fixed my database not working. I had to switch from Core to .NET.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, the connection string wasn't working. Or
Was it the provider that was off?
no, the connection string it just wouldn't work.
So this part worked though, right?
Yeah, just not using the data directory, pipe data directory. Just that didn't work. I could use a full path to it though.
Let's see if this works here. And I'm not going to provide a provider name. I think I can get away without it. So there's my connection string. I've replaced everything except for robotdb.mdf with data directory. I'm going to see if it can connect up that way. I need to go to my references, add a reference under framework. I'm going to go to system.configuration. I need to enable system.configuration. And that's so that here in my DB manager, I'm going to add say string. What's going to end up becoming is string.str is equal to DB manager. No, is equal to configuration manager dot connection strings dot and then I'm going to use the name I gave it, which is robotdb. That's going to go in here dot connection string, and I'm going, instead of this, I'm going to leave that there so that I can troubleshoot, and then I'm going to see if that works. And it worked. And you'll see examples where we actually specify three things here: the name, the connection string, and then the DB provider. If you omit the DB provider, it'll use the default, and the default is fine in this case because it's SQL Server. And so really all you need is a name and a connection string, and then that will connect you up to your database. So I can get rid of this now. I know that that works, or I could leave it in there if I wanted to. I can always get it back. And once I have that now, I'm going to use a lot of this for my insert function. So my insert function is just going to be public void insert And then I'm going to want to get a robot in here to insert. And I'm just going to kind of use a lot of that. So my connection string's the same, command's the same, except that it's going to be insert into robot values. And I'm just going to borrow this off of the so values, and I'm going to use parameters. So I'm going to put in a title. I'm going to put in a size. I'm going to put in a serial number, and then a operational. So that's my SQL command, and then we're not going to do a data reader. All we're going to do is command execute non-query. Because we're not really getting anything back with this insert command, which means I also don't need all this read stuff in here. So that's basically the insert. Now, question, how do I get these values into the query? The way I do that is we say command dot parameters add with value. Very good. And you notice you get a parameter name and then the value you want. So the parameter name is going to be, in this case, title. And then what value I'm going to put? Well, it's what I have in the robot. So that I'm passing in robot dot title. And so there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of these. I'm just going to copy this 4 times. 2, 3, 4. And just do this. And that will add all my parameters. Open my connection, execute non-query. I exit out of the using. That will automatically close my connection, and that should be able to do an insert. Does that make sense? So I'm going to move. I'm going to do the similar thing for my update. Again, I'm going to pass a robot in. My update command is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be update robot set title equal to title, size equal to size, serial number equal to serial number, operational equal to operational, and I need a where clause here. Where ID is equal to at ID, which then means that I also need to add a parameter for ID and I'll use the robot's ID. My delete is also very similar. Yeah, I will. Again, I'm going to delete. I'm kind of going quick because I know that we're running out of time here, and I want to make sure you have there. So the delete is going to be delete from robot where ID equals ID, and that means I don't need all this. I just need the ID field. So that gives me all my CRUD methods. And then now I just need to be able to I need some I'm going to need some labels. So let's see. I'll put ID here. And I need, I've got ID, I've got title, I've got size, I've got serial number, I've got, and then operational. And let's see. And probably the easiest way for me to spread these out. Let's see. Label. I'll put this at 50, 75, 100. That's too close. We'll do them 50 apart. So 50, 100, 150, 200, and 250. And then I need some text boxes. And I had one too many. I think that's all I need. And then I will give all my text boxes names. TXB ID. TXB title. TXB size, TXB serial number. And really this one should be a checkbox. And then let's see, we need some buttons. So I will have btn add. An update button. And a delete. So we've got add, update, delete buttons. We set their names. We've got text boxes, one for each, using logical names. The only thing with the text boxes is we have names. You could empty out these text elements here so that we don't have text box being displayed in them. So we got, and then we can set up our ad. So I'm going to be using this database manager quite a bit. Maybe what I'll do is I will actually declare it up here at the class level so that I can use it throughout the program. And so when I add, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a robot. And I'm going to say robot dot. If I'm adding a robot, I don't need to set the ID field because the program's going to do that for me. But I am going to set everything else. Operational is equal to checkbox operational dot is checked. Is checked is you'll see this with Booleans. You have that question mark. Ours is actually a Boolean, regular Boolean. This one is a nullable Boolean. There's two ways of handling that. You could make our class be a nullable Boolean, but I'm just going to do this. So if it's true, then this will be true. Otherwise, it'll be false. And then I can set the other things on this. Let's see. We have title is equal to text box title.text robot dot let's see, size is equal to txb size dot text robot dot, what else do we have, serial number equals txb serial number dot text. Looks like I forgot to name one of my text boxes. And then now that we have a robot, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use our database manager. Our database manager has an add method. or an insert method. So what I can do is I can say, what do we call it? DMR, Database Manager Robots dot insert, and it takes a robot. So we just pass in a robot, and it takes care of adding the robot to the database. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to do this again. We need to reload our robots list. So I need to do that, and then what I need to do is refresh my listbox robots.items.refresh. So I insert this robot to the database, I get the robots back out of the database, and then I refresh my list. I don't want to do this. You might be tempted to go listbox robots.items.add robot. Why can't I just do that? Because if I do that, I'm adding to the list in the list box. I'm not doing anything with the database. We don't want to do that. Right. We need to add it to the database. Then we need to refresh our robots list up here from the database, and then we need to show it. Because, and the reason when you're inserting you have to do that is because it's only going to get an ID field once it gets added to the database. Because the database adds the ID field, and that's the only way you can get your data, your database updated. So let's see what happens here. So I'm, title, hexapod, octopod, pod 1, size large, serial number 1114. It's operational, and then I'll click add. And you can see that it was added to the database. Does that make sense? Now what I want to be able to do is, if I double click on these, I want to be able to have their information show up in the detailed view. So to do that, all I do is I go to my main window. I select my list box, and I'm going to go look at the properties, and I'm going to go look at my actions. And for the list box here, I'm going to see if there's a double click. Mouse down, mouse enter, mouse leave, mouse double click. That's the event I want. So I'm going to make an event here, and what I'm going to do is, since I know the I'm going to say robot is equal to my list box robots dot selected item. I know that every item that I've added to this robot is a robot. But if I look at selected item, it's object. How do I turn that into a robot? Well, boxing and unboxing. I cast it. Yep. So if I cast this to robot, I can either do it this way, or I can do it using the as operator. Either way will work. I now have a robot. I've taken the selected item. It's a robot. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to say txb id dot text is equal to robot dot id. That's an int, so I've got to toString it. And then I just go down and title text is equal to robot dot title. TXB serial number is equal dot text is equal to robot dot serial number. TXB size is equal to dot text is equal to size. I think that's got everything. Oh, and then tx and then checkbox operational dot is checked is equal to tx is equal to robot dot operational. Oh, gotta close the existing one. And when I click on these and double click on them, they show up. And you know, I could make maybe if I want to duplicate hexapod, I could just do that and add it. And now I've got hexapod. Of course, I really want this to be maybe 3 or maybe 4. If I add, I could kind of do an add in. Well, I need my update and deletes to work. So that's the next step. And let's see, I got 10 minutes. Let me see if I can knock those out. So I click on my update. It's going to be similar to my add. But rather than getting a new robot, I'm going to do the same thing. Well, actually, yeah, I'm going to get the new robot. I am going to say robot.id, because I need the ID field here, is equal to txb id dot. Actually, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to take it from the list box. I don't want to... the one I want to update is the one I've got selected. So I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to start off with the robot being the selected one on the list box, so it gets the ID field, and then I'll set these from what's in the text fields, the text boxes, and then we are going to do update rather than insert, and then do the refreshes. And then for my delete, it'll be come on, give me my event. There we go. And for my delete, it's going to be kind of similar to this. I don't need this. I just need to get the list box, the one that's selected in the list box, and then just do a delete. And so now if I want to do an update or do an add, I could start off with this one, which is fairly similar. And there I can add that. If I wanted to update that to a different serial number, now it's updated and I have all my CRUD functionality built. And if I want to delete that, I delete it and it's deleted. So that is doing all the CRUD functionality. And I did this kind of quickly. You can look through the CRUD stands for create, retrieve, update, and delete. And there are a couple different ways you can set things up, but this kind of gives you the fundamentals of how that works. I made a layer for my database, put all my basic functions in here. Without looking directly at the code, you can see these are all this get, insert, update, delete. That's really, create, insert is really the create, update, delete, and retrieve is the get. So these are really CRUD functions. And then, I have a model for my data item which matches, the data, what's in the database. And once I have that, it actually really simplifies writing the code, because all these are if you think about it, if I'm adding a robot, I'm getting the text values out of my text boxes, making a robot object, and then just calling my database manager's insert method. If I want to, this one is just to transfer a robot from the list to the text boxes so I can look at it in detail. Usually there's some kind of detail view type thing and list view type of thing in most CRUD type database applications. The update basically is just get a robot, the selected robot from the list, and then so that I have the ID. Really, I just needed the ID field here. That's why I pulled it off of the selected item to get the ID field, and then I could show the rest here. And actually, my user, often we will not actually show this ID field here. And the reason is that usually we don't want the user to manipulate that directly because it's getting from the database. You might show it read-only, but normally don't show that. But the update, we need that ID field, and we get it from the list box in this case. And then the delete, we need that ID field. So again, we get whichever selected the list box, and then we run the delete. So I'll get rid of that to make it simpler. And that's basically the function. Any questions? Yeah, so when I add, basically notice here, I instantiate a new robot. I set its values from the text boxes, and then I call the insert method from the DB manager. The insert method makes a connection and executes the SQL command to insert it into the database. Then when I'm done with that, what happens is I then call the get robots method. It comes back to my DB manager and executes the get robots method to re-get the entire list. You could be more efficient. You could actually kind of incorporate some code so that when you do an insert, it just gets back the one and fixes the table and stuff. I'm doing this kind of the simpler way where it just goes ahead and retrieves everything and puts it back in just to kind of keep my code a little simpler. But there are more. But this does lack a little bit of efficiency because I am retrieving it. But I retrieve the entire list of robots, and then I refresh the display so that when this one gets added, its ID field gets updated. Does that make sense? And so you often have to be, you a lot of times you might think, oh, I just need to insert the robot into the database. But if you don't refresh the list, you might have weird things happen. So you often have to refresh that list, or at least update this robot in the underlying list. You can shortcut it that way, and you could save some processing time if you did that. But with us just starting, we're just going to do it this way for now. Any other questions? Yeah, hopefully that helps. And that's a good way of building databases. And after you learn this one, I recommend, it's not a bad idea to have some kind of thing that some database thing that you work with, over time. They're kind of, it's not tremendously hard, but you're going to find that later on, when you work as a programmer, you're going to do a lot with databases. In fact, I would say that a good portion of the stuff that you do out there is you're basically connecting the user to their data and then presenting it to them in a way that they can read it easily, that they can update things easily, and so you're connecting them to their database. And so doing that, the more you play around with this, the better you get at it. The more it's going to make it easier for you later on. Right on. That's all I've got for today, and I will get this uploaded and so that you all can view it. Thank you.